I have lived a long time now, long enough that most of the people I knew when I was young are gone, and the town they walked through is gone too, in a way. But there are some days you don't lose. You carry them. You carry them right up to the end. And the day a stranger got down off his horse to lift a child out of the mud, that is one of the days I am still carrying. Let me set it down the way it happened. It was the tail end of October. I know that because the aspens up the ridge had already turned and dropped, and the wind coming down off the high country had teeth in it. We were a small place. A general store, which I ran with my husband before he passed, a livery, a church that doubled as the schoolhouse, and a handful of houses leaning into each other like they were trying to keep warm. We were the last real stop before the pass closed for the season. After us, there was nothing but timber and stone, and weather all the way to the far valleys. That made us a busy little spot in the autumn. Everybody who meant to cross before the snow came through us first. Wagons, mules, men with packs, families running from something or towards something. You learn a lot about people watching them pass through a town like that. You learn it fast. The rain had been coming and going for 3 days. Not hard rain, just that gray, patient, soaking kind that turns a road to soup and makes everybody's temper short. The main street, we only had the one, was churned up so bad you could lose a boot in it. I remember standing in my doorway that morning with a cup of coffee, watching a man's horse sink to its fetlocks, and the man cussing at it like the horse had done it on purpose. And then the Hadley wagon came in. I'm going to call them the Hadleys, though that wasn't quite their name, because there are still folks alive who might know the family, and I see no reason to shame the grandchildren for the grandfather. The Hadleys were a big party. 2 wagons, a string of good animals, 3 grown men, 2 women, a clutch of children, and more crates and trunks than any decent family ought to own. They had money. You could see it in the way they held their chins. Money does that to some people. Makes them think the rest of the world is furniture. They pulled up in front of my store because that's where everybody pulled up. The men climbed down and went to see about feed for the animals. The women stayed up on the seat with their skirts gathered, looking at our little street like it had personally offended them. I went out to greet them, because that was my business, and I'd have greeted the devil himself if he wanted to buy flour. That's when I noticed the boy. He was riding in the second wagon, but not the way the other children were riding. The others were tucked up under blankets and oilcloth, dry as you please. This one was sitting on the very back on the open boards where the rain could get at him and the mud kicked up from the wheels could spatter his legs. He had no coat, just a shirt that had been somebody's once and was nobody's now, the kind of shirt that's been washed gray and then washed past gray. He was thin in the way that scares you. Not skinny like a growing boy, thin like a question. I'd guess he was 8, maybe 9, and small for it. He had dark hair plastered to his forehead and a way of watching everything without seeming to look at anything, which is a thing children learn when looking at the wrong thing gets them hurt. I said good morning to the women. The older one nodded at me like she was doing me a favor. The younger one didn't bother. "That boy's going to catch his death back there," I said. I meant it kindly. I meant it as a thing one woman says to another. The older one's mouth went tight. "He's not ours," she said. "We took him on at the fork, doing his folks a kindness." She said the word kindness the way you'd set down something you didn't want to be holding. His folks. Dead, fever, somewhere back east. He was just there at the crossing, half-starved, and Mr. Hadley said we'd carry him as far as the next settlement and let somebody there see to him. She looked down the street, at our church, at our store, at the gray sky pressing down on all of it. "I suppose this is the next settlement." So that was the shape of it. They'd picked the child up to feel good about themselves, and now they meant to set him down to be rid of the bother. And they'd convinced themselves the 2 acts together added up to charity. I have seen a lot of meanness in my life, and most of it doesn't announce itself. Most of it wears a clean collar and talks about doing the right thing. I was about to offer to take the boy and myself. I'd already half decided it, when one of the Hadley men came back from the livery in a foul mood. The feed cost more than he wanted to pay. The road ahead was worse than he'd hoped. He was a big man, soft in the middle but big in the shoulders, with a red face that the cold made redder. He climbed up to check his load and found the boy sitting back there among the crates, and something about the sight of him just set the man off. "Get down," he said. The boy got down. He moved quick. He'd had practice at moving quick when grown men used that voice. "You've been nothing but dead weight," the man said, "eating our food, slowing us at the fords." None of which could have been true, looking at the size of the child, but a man who's already decided to do an ugly thing will find his reasons on the way. "This is your stop. Off you go." The boy stood in the mud and didn't say anything. He had a little bundle, no bigger than a loaf of bread, tied up in a rag. Everything he owned, I suppose. He held it against his chest. And here is the part I have turned over in my mind 10,000 times, because I keep wanting to have done something faster. The man shoved him. It wasn't even a hard shove, not the way a man hits another man. It was the kind of shove you'd give a gate or a stubborn calf. Careless. That's what made it so bad. There was no anger in it that respected the boy enough to be angry at him. The man just put his hand out and pushed, the way you'd move a thing out of your way, and the boy's feet went out from under him in the slick of the road, and he sat down hard in the mud. The bundle came loose. Whatever was in it, I never did learn, spilled into the muck. The boy scrambled after it on his hands and knees, and the mud was all over him now. His face, his gray shirt, his hands clawing in the brown water for whatever small treasures he had left in the world. Somebody laughed. One of the other men up on the lead wagon. Not a cruel laugh even. Just an easy, unbothered laugh, the laugh of a man who has never once in his life been the one sitting in the mud. The women looked away. Not in shame. In the bored way you look away from something that isn't your concern. "Wagon's lighter already," the red-faced man said. And he turned to climb back up. I had my mouth open. I swear I did. I was coming down off my step. But you have to understand, I was one old woman, and they were a party of strong men with money and somewhere to be, and the truth is that meanness counts on exactly that. It counts on the rest of us being just a half-second too slow, just a little too small, just a little too unsure that it's our place to say anything. So I was a half-second too slow. But somebody else wasn't. I hadn't even noticed him. That's the thing. He'd been there the whole time off at the end of the street, watering his horse at the trough by the livery, and he was the kind of man your eye just slides past. Not because he was small. He was not small, but because he was still. In a busy street full of people fussing and cussing and hauling, he was the one thing not moving, and stillness has a way of disappearing. I'd seen his sort before, though never quite like him. A mountain man, a high country man. The kind that comes down out of the timber maybe twice a year for powder and salt and coffee, and then goes back up to wherever it is they go. He wore buckskin gone dark and soft with age and grease and weather. He had a beard the color of iron and ash, and hair to his collar, and a face so brown and lined from sun and wind, and cold that you couldn't have guessed his years within a decade. Could have been 50. Could have been 70. He had a long rifle in a scabbard and a knife at his belt, and he smelled, I would learn shortly, of wood smoke and horse and pine. He had been standing there with his horse's reins loose in one hand, watching the whole thing the way the rest of us were watching it. And then he wasn't watching anymore. I didn't even see him decide. He just dropped the reins, let them fall right in the mud, which a horseman never does, which told me later that he'd stopped thinking about everything in the world except one thing, and he walked up the middle of that street toward the wagons. He didn't hurry. That was the strange part. He didn't run, didn't shout. He just came on at a steady walk, his boots making that sucking sound in the mud, and somehow that walk was louder than any yelling could have been. Heads started to turn, the laughing stopped. He went straight past the men, didn't look at them. He walked to where the boy was kneeling in the road, still scrabbling after his spilled things, and he got down. He got down on one knee, right there in the mud. A grown man, a hard man in his good buckskins, down on his knee in the filth of the road next to a child nobody wanted. I'll never forget it because nobody does that. Grown men do not kneel, especially not men like him, who I would have bet had not knelt to anything but to drink from a creek in 30 years. But down he went, slow and easy, until his eyes were level with the boy's eyes. He said something to the child. I was too far to hear it. The boy went still and looked at him. Then the mountain man reached out, and his hands, I saw them up close after, were enormous, scarred knuckles like walnuts, and he gathered up the boy's spilled things out of the mud, careful as if they were eggs. He wiped each one on his own sleeve, dirtying his own clothes to clean the boy's, and he set them back in the rag, and he tied the rag, and he handed it to the boy. Then he stood up, and he turned around, and he looked at the men on the wagons. That was when the street got very, very quiet. I have heard people say that a quiet man is the dangerous kind, and I used to think that was just a thing people said. After that morning, I believed it. The mountain man didn't reach for his rifle. He didn't put his hand on his knife. He just stood there in the road with the mud halfway up his shins and the rain coming down soft on his iron-gray head, and he looked up at the red-faced Hadley man on the wagon seat, and he said one word. You. That was all, just you. But he said it the way you'd lay a hand flat on a table, with a kind of weight that made it final. The red-faced man tried to laugh it off. Men like him have one tool, and that tool is acting bigger than they are, and they use it on everybody, even when it's plainly the wrong tool. Mind your business, old-timer, he said. Boy's not yours. He's not anybody's. We did him a kindness carrying him this far. I watched the kindness, the mountain man said. He had a low voice, gravelly, the voice of a man who didn't use it much and saw no reason to waste it now. He let that sit there. I watched the kindness, and every soul on that street understood exactly what he meant, and the red-faced man understood it too, and his face went a deeper red. He fell, the man said. Mud slick, you can see that. He fell because you put him down. I watched that too. The mountain man took one step closer to the wagon, just one. I have spent 40 years up in that high country. You know what's up there. Bears, cats, cold that'll take your fingers in a night and your life by morning, wolves when the winter's hard. I have looked all of it in the eye. Another step. And I have never, in 40 years, seen anything up there I'd call lower than a strong man laying hands on a starving child to be rid of the trouble of him. Nobody moved. Even the horses seemed to hold still. One of the other Hadley men, younger, leaner, the one who'd laughed, started to climb down off the lead wagon with his chest out, the way young men do when they think the situation calls for them. Now look here. The mountain man turned his head and looked at him. Just looked. The young man got down to the bottom step, put one boot toward the mud, thought about something, and went right back up again and sat down. He sat down. I have never in my life seen a man's courage drain out of him so fast and so completely, and the mountain man hadn't said a single word to him. He just turned his head. Now I want to be honest with you, because this is not a story where the bad man gets a thrashing and everybody cheers. Real life is rarely so satisfying, and I'd be lying if I dressed it up. There was no fight. The mountain man never raised a hand. What happened was slower and stranger, and I have come to think better. He looked back at the red-faced man. Here's what's going to happen, he said. You're going to take down something warm from one of those trunks, a coat, a blanket, I don't much care which, and you're going to hand it down to this boy. And then you're going to get your wagons out of this town, and you're going to think real hard, every mile of that pass, about the kind of man you decided to be this morning, where everybody could see. And if I don't? The mountain man was quiet for a moment. The rain ticked on the canvas of the wagons. Then I'll know, he said, what kind of man you are. And I am a man who lives a long way from anywhere and remembers everything and is in no hurry. I don't know exactly what the red-faced man saw when he looked down into that brown, lined, perfectly calm face. I only know what I saw, which was a man who had made peace with hard things a long time ago, and would not be hurried, and would not be moved, and meant every word. Whatever the Hadley man saw, it was enough. He reached back into the wagon. There was some muttering, some scrabbling. He came out with a coat, a child's coat, good wool, dark blue, plainly belonging to one of the children he'd kept dry, and he held it out, and his hand was shaking, though I don't think it was fear so much as fury at being made to do it. The mountain man didn't take it. He nodded at the boy. The boy walked up slow, watching, and took the coat from the man's hand. "And the blanket," the mountain man said. "A blanket came down too. Now go." And they went. The red-faced man hauled himself up, took the lines and clucked his teeth, and those two fine wagons pulled away through the mud, and not one of those grown people looked back at the child standing in the road. Not the men, not the women, not even the other children, who I suppose had learned already in their short lives that some people don't get looked back at. The street let out a breath all at once. People who'd been frozen in their doorways and their tracks started to move again, and there was that low buzz of everybody turning to everybody else to say, "Can you believe it? Did you see? Well, I never." The way folks do. The way I myself wanted to do. But the mountain man wasn't done. He turned back to the boy, who was standing there holding the coat too big for him and the blanket dragging in the mud, and the mountain man got down on one knee again, twice in one morning, and he helped the boy into the coat, working the small arms through the sleeves, doing up the buttons with those enormous scarred fingers, slow and clumsy and careful. And the boy let him. That's the thing that got me. A child who'd learned to flinch, who'd learned to move quick, who'd learned that grown men's hands meant trouble, that child stood still and let this stranger button his coat. Children know. They know faster and surer than we do. The boy had taken one look into that face and known he was safe, and he was right. I came down off my step then. I'd found my legs at last. "You'll both want to come in out of the wet," I said. My voice came out funny. "I've got a stove and there's coffee, and I expect this young man could use something to eat." The mountain man looked up at me, and for the first time that hard face did something soft. He had pale eyes, gray-blue, startling in all that brown. "That's kind of you, ma'am." "It's nothing." And then, because I'm a nosy old woman and always have been, "I don't believe I caught your business with that family. Is the boy yours, kin?" "Never saw him before this morning," the mountain man said. That stopped me. I suppose I'd assumed, I don't know what I'd assumed, that there was some tie, that this was an uncle, a grandfather, somebody with a claim, that what I'd watched was a family matter and not what it actually was, which was one human being deciding that another human being's misery was his concern, for no reason at all except that he'd seen it. "You did all that," I said slowly, "for a boy you never met." He stood up, holding the child's hand now, the boy's whole hand disappearing inside his, and he looked at me with those pale eyes, and he seemed honestly puzzled by the question. "Somebody had to," he said. "I have thought about those 3 words more than I have thought about most sermons. Somebody had to. Not somebody should. Not it would have been nice if somebody had to. Like it was a debt the world owed and he'd noticed nobody was paying it, so he stepped up and paid it himself, the way you'd pay a bill that came to your door even if it wasn't strictly yours, because it had come to your door and there was nobody else there. I brought them inside. I built up the stove till it roared. I put coffee in front of the man, and I put bread and butter and cold ham and the last of the morning's biscuits in front of the boy, and I want to tell you, I have never seen a child eat like that. Not greedy. Worse than greedy. Careful. He ate like he expected the plate to be taken away, like he was getting in all he could before the good thing ended, which is a way of eating no child should ever learn. The mountain man watched him eat, and didn't touch his own coffee for a long while. "What's your name, son?" he asked, gentle. The boy looked up, bread in both hands. "Tom," he said, first word I'd heard out of him. "Tom what?" The boy thought about it. You could see him reaching back for it, and you could see how far back he had to reach. "Don't know any more," he said finally. There was a what? I forget it. The mountain man nodded slowly, like that was a perfectly reasonable thing for a child to have lost, his own name, somewhere on a road behind him. Well, he said, we'll find you one. I should tell you about the rest of that day, because it's part of it, even though nothing dramatic happened. Sometimes the part where nothing dramatic happens is the most important part. The man, I learned his name was Eli, just Eli. He gave no other and I never asked. Eli stayed in town 3 days. He had meant to be up and gone by noon, back to his high country before the pass closed. But the pass was the boy's problem now, you see. The boy had been dumped in our town to be somebody's burden, and Eli had taken him up, and now Eli had to figure out what in the world to do with a child. He could have left him with me. I'd have taken him. I told Eli as much that first night, after the boy had fallen asleep on a pallet by my stove so hard and so sudden it was like somebody had blown out a lamp. You're a kind woman, Eli said. I can see that. He could do worse than to stay with you. But, he turned his coffee cup slow in his big hands. You run a store on the last road before the pass. You're a busy place half the year. He'd be safe with you and fed and warm, and I don't doubt you'd be good to him. He looked at the sleeping boy. But he's been handed off his whole short life. Picked up at one fork, set down at the next, carried as far as convenient and then put out like baggage. You leave a boy like that with a busy woman in a busy town, even a kind one, and you know what he learns. He learns he's a thing that gets left places. I didn't say anything. There wasn't anything to say because he was right, and we both knew it. Up where I am, Eli said, it's just me, it's quiet, it's hard. It's a hard life and I won't pretend it isn't, but there's nobody up there who's going to set him down anywhere. There's nobody up there but me and I don't put things down. I argued with him a little, that night and the next morning. Not because I thought he was wrong about himself. I'd seen everything I needed to see about the man in that street. I argued because the high country is no place for a child, or so I thought, and I told him so. The cold, the danger, the loneliness, no school, no other children, no woman to mother him. Eli listened to all of it. He was a good listener, that man. Most people who don't talk much aren't really listening, they're just waiting. He was actually listening. You're not wrong, he said when I'd run down. It's no easy place. But ma'am, let me ask you something. What's the boy had so far? Town after town, soft beds and warm stoves. No, he's had hunger and roads and being handed off. He's had cold already and danger already and 1,000 kinds of lonely already and not one bit of it chosen by anybody who loved him. He set his cup down. Up with me, he'll have cold and danger and lonely too, maybe, but it'll be the honest kind. And there'll be a man beside him who chose him, who's not going anywhere. There's a difference between hardship you suffer alone and hardship you suffer alongside somebody who picked you. I'd have given my whole life when I was small for the second kind. That was the most I ever heard him say at once. And the way he said when I was small told me a thing about Eli I'd been wondering, which was where a man learns to drop everything and kneel in the mud for a stranger's child. He learns it, I think, from having been that child once in some mud of his own, a long time ago, with nobody coming. Somebody had to. I understood it better now. The boy made the decision himself in the end, the way I suppose he should have. On the third morning, Eli had his horse saddled and his packs loaded, and the pass would only just barely still be open, and it was time. He knelt down in front of Tom one last time. That man spent half his time in our town down on one knee, and he said, "Now listen, son. You can stay here with this good woman. She'll feed you and keep you warm, and you'll grow up in a town with other folks around. That's a fine thing, and there's no shame in choosing it. Or you can come up the mountain with me, where it's just us and the work is hard and the winters are long and you'll have to learn to do for yourself young. I won't tell you which, but you have to choose, and once you choose, that's it. I don't put things down, but I won't drag you up there against your wanting either. So which is it?" And the boy, that thin, watchful, gray little boy who'd forgotten his own last name, looked up at this enormous bearded stranger, and then he reached out and took hold of one of Eli's big scarred fingers in his whole small fist, the way a much younger child would, and he said, "With you." That was all. With you. Same two words the man himself had used, near enough. I had to turn around and busy myself at the stove so they wouldn't see my face. They left within the hour. I packed them all the food I could spare, and a few things for the boy besides proper socks, a knit cap, some dried apples, and I wouldn't take a cent for any of it, and Eli knew better than to fight me on it. He lifted Tom up onto the horse in front of him, the boy bundled in the blue wool coat with my knit cap pulled down over his ears, and they made a strange picture, the huge weathered man and the small gray child, riding off toward the timber and the rising land beyond it. At the edge of town, where the road bends up toward the pass, the boy turned around. He turned around and looked back. I have told you that not one of those rich, fine Hadley people looked back at him when they put him down in the mud. Well, the first time in that child's life that anybody bothered to look back at him, it was him doing the looking, and he raised one small hand and waved at me, the storekeeper woman who'd given him biscuits, and I waved back so hard I near pulled my shoulder out, and then the road bent and the timber took them and they were gone. Now I will tell you the end of it, the part that makes it a story I'm still carrying instead of just a sad, strange morning I once half-watched. 8 years went by, more than that. The town changed. The pass got a better road, and then the railroad came through 40 miles south and took all our travelers with it, and we got quiet, and my husband died, and I got old in the way you do all at once. It seems like, looking back, I'd think of the boy now and then. On cold mornings, mostly. I'd wonder if he'd lived. The high country takes people I never expected to know. Then one autumn, it was October again, I remember, the aspens turning, a young man came into my store. He was tall, broad through the shoulders. He moved quiet, and he was still in that way I'd only ever seen one other man be still, like the world rushed around him and didn't touch him. He had a long rifle and a knife at his belt, and he wore buckskin gone soft with weather, and he smelled, when he got close, of wood smoke and pine. He bought powder and salt and coffee. He was polite. He called me ma'am. And I knew. Old as I was, half blind as I was getting, I knew him before he said a word, because there is a thing in the eyes that doesn't change, and his eyes were the gray, watchful eyes of a boy I'd once fed biscuits to and waved goodbye to a long time ago. "You don't remember me," he said, when his things were on the counter. "I do," I said. "I never forgot you for one day, Tom." His face did something then, something it had clearly learned not to do easy, and he told me, standing right there at my counter, that Eli had passed 2 winters back. Old age in the end, not the mountain. He'd died in his own cabin by his own fire with the boy he'd raised sitting beside him, holding one of those big scarred hands. The young man's voice didn't shake when he told it, but he had to stop once and look out the window. "He left me everything," Tom said. "The cabin, the trap lines, the horse." A small smile. "His name, I'm Tom Brennan now, that was his name. Brennan. He gave it to me about a month after we got up there. Said a man ought to have a what to go with his name." He paused. "I'd lost mine. He gave me one of his." I had to sit down. There was a stool behind the counter, and I sat down on it. "He told me about you," Tom said. "Every time we talk about how I came to be his, he always told it the same way. He said there was a fine, kind woman in the last town who'd have taken me in and fed me and been good to me, and that I could have had an easier life if I'd stayed. He said he'd never been sure, all those years, if he'd done right, dragging a boy up a mountain." Tom looked at me, those gray eyes steady. "I told him 100 times he did. But I think he wanted me to come find you and say it, so I'm saying it, to you since he can't hear it anymore." He swallowed. "He did right, he gave me a life. He gave me the only thing anybody ever gave me that they didn't take back." We talked a long while. I closed the store and made coffee, and we talked till the light went. He told me about the high country, the long white winters, the years of learning, the old man teaching him to read by the fire out of the 3 books he owned, teaching him to track and trap and shoot and to be still. He told me Eli had never once raised a hand to him, not once in all those years. A man who could quiet a grown bully with a turn of his head, and he never needed it on the child. He used to say a thing, Tom told me at the door when he was leaving. When I was small and scared of the dark or the cold or whatever a boy gets scared of up there, he'd say it every time. He'd say, "Nobody's putting you down, Tom, not ever again. You hear me? Somebody finally picked you up and he's not putting you down." So that's the story. That's the one I keep. People like the part with the wagons. They like the part where the quiet man faces down the bullies in the street and never has to lift a hand. And I'll grant you it's a fine part, and it happened just the way I told it. But that was never the heart of it for me. Any man with enough hard years behind him can stare down a coward. That's not the rare thing. The rare thing was the kneeling. A grown man getting down in the mud, twice in one morning, level with a child's eyes. The rare thing was a man with every reason to ride on by, who dropped his own reins in the dirt because he couldn't make himself watch one more person get treated like baggage. The rare thing was somebody had to, and a man hearing those words in his own chest and deciding the somebody was him. They tossed that orphan into the mud and walked away, and they never thought about him again. I'd wager, not for 1 minute the rest of their soft and comfortable lives. But a man got down off his horse. And that boy, who'd been put down at every fork in the road since the day he was born, that boy never got put down again.